Alright, what's up folks? So in this video, I'm going to tell you guys the story of how my family became millionaires. To be very clear, what do I mean by millionaires? It doesn't mean that they have $1 million in their bank account. So my family's generational wealth, it comes mostly from the properties that they own. And I don't think it takes much. Nowadays, for example, if you live in New York City or Toronto, and let's say if you own your home, and I'm talking about you have your mortgage paid off, and you have no debt, right? No credit card debt, no line of credit, no student loans. Well, then yeah, most likely your net worth is going to be at least $1 million to $2 million. Just look at the prices of these homes now. So let me talk about China's 7 years of miracle from 2001 to 2008. Now, let's rewind the clock back a bit. 1976, Cultural Revolution has ended. Chairman Mao Zedong has passed away at the age of 82. Although I would say that the Cultural Revolution, most of the activities, most of the chaos, they lasted from 1966 until 1971. From 1971 to 76, nothing much did really happen. However, one thing that I did mention, the previous generation, so my mom's generation, my aunts, uncles, some of my dad, his relatives, they all got kicked out of school. School was 100% shut down. And almost everybody, including the current Chinese President Xi Jinping, he was sent to the countryside. Many people like my dad and my uncles, my aunts, they all had to take care of animals down at the countryside. Nobody had any form of education. It's very important. China's literacy rate was extremely low, and China was one of the poorest nations on earth. Then comes the year of 1978. After Chairman Mao Zedong passed away, the next chairman of China would be Comrade Deng Xiaoping. And Deng Xiaoping was actually not appointed by Chairman Mao Zedong, but he was very, very sneaky, even though many of you guys might consider him to be a midget. But he was able to outmaneuver his way around the other candidates, and he secured his spot as the next chairman of the Chinese Communist Party. In 1978, he implemented a policy. It's basically called China's opening up. This is basically at a time China would no longer be a communist country. China will become a free market capitalist country, and China will be opening up to the rest of the world. You guys want to know something interesting? It was also during this time period, during China's first opening up, when China opened up to the rest of the world, when the people in China could watch, let's say, NBA games or NFL games or the English Premier League. And this is the first taste that the Chinese citizens got of the outside world, of what Western society, what it really looked like. So it was way back in 1982. Actually, the United States government actually made a promise to the Chinese Communist Party in order to open trade between China and the US, because the US government obviously wanted to use China for their cheap labor and their massive workforce. So the United States actually made a promise to the Chinese Communist Party back in 1982, claiming that there is and will only ever be one China, and that Taiwan will never ever be able to become an independent sovereign country. Yes, they actually made this promise all the way back in 1982. And the United States also promised the Chinese Communist Party to taper off all of their support, whether it's by military or financially, to the island of Taiwan, and that they would never ever interfere China and Taiwan's diplomatic business. Remember that. The United States actually made this promise way back in 1982. But I'm sure you guys get the idea. The United States have virtually broken every single promise they've made to foreign nations. They've broken almost every single treaty. But that's a topic for another video. So what happened after China opened up? Imagine this, right? So just 3 years of China's opening up, China was extremely poor. Let's say, if you're an average Chinese citizen, you worked extremely hard for the next 3 years. Let's say if you worked at a toy factory from 78 to 81, you saved up a little bit of money by working 72 to 84 hours a week. Let's say you moved to the capital, right, and you purchased a home. Back in 1981, that home probably costed nothing. It was probably 10 grand, let's say, USD. Let's say USD. Was probably less than that. I don't think you guys realize, how poor China actually was back in the 1970s and 1980s. And in 1984, Olympic Games in Los Angeles. So China competed in its first ever Olympic Games. That was actually way back in 1984 in Los Angeles. And after China was able to compete finally in the Olympics after their opening up, So afterwards, hosting the Olympics will become China's #1 goal for the next 20 plus years. And you have to remember, way back then, it was a lot harder to actually get selected as the host city for the Olympic Games. It's not like what it looks like now. So China would make a bid for the Olympic Games of 2000. But of course, they lost that bid to Sydney, Australia. Australia would end up hosting the Olympics in 2000. Then China thought, the next Olympics in 2004, they're just not financially ready. It's better off to take a 4 years break. So 2004 was given to Greece. Then finally, in the year of 2001, the IOC announced that Beijing, China, the capital of China, will become the host city for the Beijing Olympic Games. This is a turning point, right, in China's political, diplomatic history. China's culture, China's economy, everything would change because obviously China wanted it to present themselves to the world. They want to show the rest of the world that they're really the strongest, the most developed, the best country in the world. So the entire country had to go through an economic revamp. So what would happen is, imagine if you were an average Chinese guy working at a factory, extremely hard, and you worked for 72 to 84 hours a week, and you saved up enough money after 3 years to buy a home in Beijing for $10,000 USD. So typically on average, right, the average Chinese usually get a condo or apartment. So the average, that's the standard in China, is 100 square meters, or this is equal to 1,076 square feet. That's the equivalent. It's very rare to find 2 bathrooms in a Chinese condo, which I find strange. I think 2 bathrooms will work much better. So typically, it's 3 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. And of course, 1 kitchen, 1 living room. The rest is pretty obvious. So yeah, that's the standard. So imagine if you're this guy, right? China just opened up to the rest of the world. You find a job at a factory, right? The chaos of the Cultural Revolution has ended. You work for 3 years, you save up 10 grand, you buy a house. China in 2001, the IOC announces that China will be hosting the Olympic Games of summer 2008 in the capital of Beijing. And obviously, China wants a complete makeover of this country. And how would China go through a complete makeover? And you have to remember, up until this time, you won't see these homes anymore. So the homes China were building back in the 70s and 80s, even up until the 1990s, many of these really old homes, they're completely falling apart. They look like they're part of the third world countries. They're the houses that you would expect, let's say, if you went to an extremely poor country. Let's say if you went to the countryside of Panama or Guinea-Bissau, or if you went to the hood in Rio de Janeiro. They're the typical homes that you would see in slums of third world countries. They're completely just falling apart. And obviously China does not want to show this side of extreme poverty. So what happened? All of these really old homes, all of these homes that's falling apart, they all got torn down. And they were all being replaced by brand new skyscrapers everywhere. Yeah, let's come back to this random Chinese guy, right, from 1981. So that home, that 100 square meter unit that he bought for 10,000 USD, 20 years later, this home is looking like the hood. It's falling apart. It's extremely old. And China wants to replace it with a brand new skyscraper apartment. So what happens is that home is going to get torn down. However, this is why so many Chinese immigrants are so rich. If you want to tear down the building, the guy's going to say, well, what are you going to do, right? I bought this for 10K. So the Chinese developers, they will come in and say that, you know what? We're going to give you $1 million cash for your apartment. No, I'm serious. A lot of Chinese people became millionaires because of China's property and economic miracle. This all happened between 2001 to 2008, right? And leading up to China hosting the Olympic Games, and China wanted to completely upgrade their country, and they also want to welcome millions of the tourists into the country every single year. And obviously, they don't want the foreign tourists to walk in China, and they want to think that, oh my God, this is a third world country. Look at all these places. This is the hood. This is the ghetto. This is the slums, and this is looking even worse than the poorest neighborhoods in Brazil. So all the poor neighborhoods in the tier 1 cities, in cities like Beijing, in cities like Chongqing, in Shenzhen, in Shanghai, in Guangzhou, so all of the really old houses, they all got torn down. And the developers paid these people who basically bought these old units back in, let's say, 1980s, 1990s, right, before 2001, they bought it for peanuts. And 20 years later, when the developers came in, and these people were all given insane amount of money. You have to remember the properties in tier 1 cities in China are extremely valuable today. They're so expensive. That's why tier 1 cities in many parts of China are becoming so unaffordable. Yeah, that's how so many people got so much money. That's why you wonder if some of these Chinese immigrants, right? How can they just move to, let's say, United States or Australia or the UK or Canada? How can they buy a home for cash? Well, there's a saying in China. It's called this. Remember this. 天时, 地利, 人和. Well, there's no perfect translation for these 6 characters. It's very simple. So, 天 talks about the heaven. So you can basically translate it to something like this. So, 天 means basically the sky. You can think of it as the heaven. And what is 地利? Well, 地 literally translates to the ground. But this basically talks about the earth, right? And 人和, what does this mean? 人 means humans. 和, you can say human corporations. So the easiest way to translate this would be right place. I would say place, right? 地利, right here. Right people. This is the 人和, human cooperation. And of course, the right time. That's, you can say 天时, the heaven. So, right place, right people, right time. 天时, 地利, 人和. It's that simple. Those people were extremely lucky, including my mom, including my dad, including all of my uncles. That's how these Chinese people made so much money. You have to remember, the Chinese wage, even in modern day 2024, if we were to convert it to USD, it's still way lower compared to Western countries, compared to the G7 countries. The reason why all of these people got so rich was because, they worked hard for a few years. They were able to save up for a down payment for basically an extremely shitty Chinese apartment that they bought for peanuts. Then between the years of 2001 to 2008, China basically wanted to upgrade their entire nation. China wanted to lift their image for the rest of the world, leading up to the Beijing Olympic Games. So this happened to tens of millions of Chinese people. They bought their home for peanuts. 20 years later, it's worth $1 million. And I'm not talking about 1 million yuan. I'm talking about 1 million USD. And for that kind of money, right, you can easily, right, take the cash and fill out your immigration papers. You can buy a solid upscale home. This is back in 2001. You could probably get a decent home for $200,000 or $300,000, and you can put the rest of the money towards your retirement. You can get a brand new car. You can buy yourself a nice family holiday, and you're pretty much set for life. Because the reason why so many young people are struggling, well, what is your number one expense right now? It's either your rent or your mortgage payment. Imagine how easy your life would be if you didn't have to pay rent or mortgage payment. You take out your number one expense, everything else is very easy. Unfortunately, this type of thing does not happen anymore. And let's talk about my mom, right? So unfortunately, I'm sure many of you guys know my mom. She has had a lot of divorces. Her first divorce, 1989. So 1989, after she got her first divorce, she went back to school, I believe maybe for 2 years. It might even be 1 year. I don't know what's the exact timeline. Roughly 90 to 91. And you have to remember, she went to some kind of basically adult education school. She got her certificate. She became an accountant. You have to remember this was a chaotic time in China because for 10 years, all the Chinese schools were shut down. So it was very normal for 30-year-old adults to come back to school. So she got her certificate. By the way, her tuition, her books, her meals, and her housing, everything was paid for by the Chinese Communist Party. After she graduated, there was no final exam. You don't have to worry about filling out a resume or apply to any jobs or going to interviews. Basically, what happens is, say, if you finish the final course on a Wednesday, and you will receive a letter. It says that Thursday morning, report to your workplace. You're officially accountant. My mom, she was assigned to this hydro company. I grew up in a tiny subdivision. Almost everybody in that subdivision, it was very wealthy at the time, all worked for the same hydro company. At the peak, I believe, between the 1980s to 1990s, they actually employed 300,000 300,000 Chinese citizens worked for this hydro company, and my mom was assigned to the company as accountant. And as part of China's basically a property miracle, China invested billions and billions of dollars into their property market. They built hundreds of millions of units across the country. I grew up in a tiny subdivision of just 30,000 people, very, very tiny. So in the subdivision I grew up in, there was 43 apartment buildings, anywhere between 5 to 7 stories high. All 43 of the apartment buildings, they were all given out for free, 100% free, right? No debt, no mortgage, no property tax to employees of the hydro company. Everybody in my hometown benefited. That's why my subdivision was so wealthy from the 1980s to 1990s, because the 30,000 people that lived there, imagine, living through your life, right? You never have to pay mortgage. You never have to worry about paying rent. You never have to worry about paying property tax. China, as of 2024, still does not have property tax. I have to make that very, very clear. That is something that only happens in the West and is a 100% scam. So yeah, upon graduation, roughly 1990 to 1991, not too long before I was born, my mom, she got 2 apartments side by side in the building. So all of the buildings were numbered according to basically the timeline of where these buildings were built. I believe building number 1 was built maybe in 77, 78. It's quite old, might be torn down now. I will be going back to my hometown when I visit China. So I lived in building number 1 growing up, and she got 2 45 square meter apartments, 2 bedrooms. So this is roughly 90 square meters. So almost 1,000 square feet. My mom, upon her graduation, upon earning her certificate, she got these units for free. And my dad roughly went through the same process. So remember, my dad, he's the youngest. He's the youngest of his family. He has 4 older brothers. So I have 4 older uncles. And unfortunately, the first one, he kicked the bucket at the age of 49. What happened? Well, he was bitten by a poisonous snake. There was more to the story. Even before he was bitten, just rampant drugs and alcohol, cigarettes, everything. Save my second uncle. He kicked the bucket at the age of 50. Rampant abuse of drugs, cigarettes, and alcohol. It completely destroyed his body. I think both his lungs actually collapsed before he turned 50. He would spend the remainder of his life in the hospital before he finally passed away. So terrible, terrible addiction. I want to make something clear, especially all the ladies complaining that, oh, guys, they all do drugs, they all smoke, they all drink, they have terrible habits, gambling. Well, first of all, I don't smoke, I don't drink, I don't gamble, I don't do drugs. But that's the guys you're choosing, right? Somehow women are just attracted to this kind of man who just wants to gamble, wants to smoke, wants to drink all the time. So they kicked the bucket very early. But my 3rd and 4th uncle, they're still alive. I don't know where exactly they're living. They might be back in my hometown. So my 3rd uncle, I know for sure currently he owns 3 houses minimum. My 4th uncle, I believe he also owns 3 houses. He gave one of his apartments away to his daughter, and she's living in a separate city. I believe she's living in Shenyang, which is a few hours away from my hometown in China. So as you can see, right, everybody that, way back in the day, as long as you were willing to come back to school for a year or maybe 2 years, you earned some kind of education. Like my mom, she became an accountant, but you can earn basically a degree in anything, and you were guaranteed a job right after graduation. You don't have to search for a job. You don't have to worry about your interview skills, and you will be set financially for the rest of your life. You don't ever have to worry about paying rent. You don't ever have to worry about making mortgage payment. And one thing I did mention that China does not have universal healthcare. The hydro company that they worked for has basically every single employee, they get their health insurance covered for life. Even my mom, right, she's constantly getting sick, and she has to spend at least a month or 2 in the hospital every single year. If she did not have the coverage from her hydro company, unfortunately, she would probably have to die at home. And I did mention my mom, she had a very, very successful sauna business based in Changchun, China. The business ran from 2004 to 2010. It's extremely, extremely difficult, right, if you want to be a successful entrepreneur. And let's say if you want to open up a restaurant, right? My sister tried it many times and she's had many restaurants closed. So I had many uncles, aunts, cousins. They've tried all kinds of businesses. Almost every single one went bankrupt. I would say the vast majority, 70 to 80% of the time, these small mom and papa shops, they don't make it past the first 12 months. So how was my mom able to have so much success with the sauna business? Well, it comes back to this point. 天时地利人和. She was at the right place, right people, right time, right? Her business peaked between 2006 to 2008. What happened during those years? It was China's economic miracle leading up to hosting of the Beijing Olympic Games. And China invested in billions of dollars and they built hundreds of millions of brand new apartments across the country. The people who bought their homes for $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, they got their homes torn down and they were given a cash lump sum payment of, let's say, anywhere between $500,000, $1 million, possibly $2 million. That's how they got extremely wealthy. And so this was a time period when a lot of older Chinese people, they had a lot of cash on their hand. So when people have money to spend, they will want to have a luxury experience. So a lot of people were willing to try out the idea of basically a mini portable sauna that you can put inside of your bedrooms. It's absolutely perfect during the winter. You can keep yourself nice and warm and you don't have to go outside anywhere. You don't have to worry about a stormy day or if it's raining outside. So in 2006, my mom, she bought her first vehicle for 80,000 Chinese yuan. Following year in 2007, my mom, she would buy 3 properties, 2 in Changchun, 1 in Jilin for cash. Yeah, she bought 3 properties for cash, and she will also go on to purchase 2 more vehicles. So in a matter of just 1 year, she bought 3 vehicles brand new, and she also purchased 3 properties in northeastern China. So once again, they had the right place, right people, right time. And unfortunately, the next generation of Chinese people, the millennials and Gen Zs, there's no way for them to have this kind of success. This simply does not happen anymore. So to all the old people who are saying that, oh, back in the day, it was so hard for us. Now you guys have everything. Well, they're 100% full of BS. Everything was easier for the previous generation. As long as you're willing to work hard, as long as you wanted to go back to school to get yourself an education, you were guaranteed to be set for life. I understand, obviously, there are Chinese people who are not as fortunate as people I know in my family. But for the most part, I'm talking about on average, right? People way back in the day, they had way better career paths, way better career opportunities set out for them compared to what the next generation of Chinese people have. Well, if you're wondering, so what happened, right, after 2008? I would say the economic miracle probably continued to happen into 2010, possibly the early 2010s, maybe into 2014, 2015. But yes, I do agree. China's economy has completely stalled. They're struggling. Same with Japan, same with South Korea. Well, same with almost all Western nations. Well, you see, good things never last. Think about, the strongest empires on earth. Think about the British Empire, right? You guys want to know why the British Empire is called the empire that the sun never sets on? Because it once occupied all 24 time zones on earth. That's how massive the British Empire was. Look at what the UK has been reduced to now. It's almost like a third world country. In fact, if you look at it geographically, right, the UK is smaller than New Zealand. That's all you're left with. And think about the Holy Roman Empire. Think about one of the most powerful empires throughout history, but has completely disappeared. Well, I actually don't agree. I don't think the Roman Empire has completely disappeared. Has changed. Has been reduced to a church. That's the Vatican. That's the remnants of the Roman Empire. Think about, the Qing Dynasty China, how massive it was. Remember back in 1800, China roughly generated 33% of the world's GDP. 1/3 of the world's GDP came out of China, but unfortunately has fallen. China has gone through a century of humiliation, right, which ended with the Second Sino-Japanese War, and also China had their own civil war. So nothing in this world lasts forever, right? Everything that goes up must also come down. And here's the thing, right, with China's poverty and the economic miracle. The reason why China was able to generate so much wealth was that, every time, let's say, if you want to go to a city and you want to build 100,000 homes, right, and that's going to create tens of thousands of jobs. So there's going to be career opportunities for the architects, right, for the plumbers, for the electricians, for the engineers, for the bricklayers. and also for anybody that just wants to do some manual labor. So this created millions of job opportunities across the country during China's poverty miracle when China was building hundreds of millions of homes. But at some point, right, you can only build so many homes. And China is at the point, basically, their entire country is completely full. It's being filled with these ghost cities and empty homes. It's estimated that there are anywhere between 80 to 100 million empty apartments across China. So yeah, the poverty development miracle, that's no longer there anymore, because basically every place in China that you can fill up with homes has all been filled. And you can only increase the demand for certain jobs in certain field by so much, right? Like the hydro company that my mom and my dad and my stepmom and my uncles, my aunts, that they worked for, right? Back in the 1980s and 1990s, at the peak, they already employed 300,000 people, right? There's no way for a company to employ, like, say, 10 million people. It's once you grow to a certain stage, right, the company peaks, then it's going to go into a decline. The reason why my mom and my dad and my uncles, they all had it so easy at getting jobs, because, way back in, at the end of the Cultural Revolution, during China's first opening up, right, China's literacy rate was extremely low. Nobody was educated, and a lot of jobs that required certain qualifications, they couldn't get filled. So as soon as somebody graduates from adult school with a piece of paper, right, whether if you're an engineer, if you're a plumber, if you're an electrician, or if you're an accountant, so everybody was extremely valuable at the time, every single person that graduated from adult school, because value comes from scarcity. But what happens, let's say if you have 300 million people graduating from university. Well, yeah, most of the university graduates, they won't be able to get a job. And that's what's happening in China. Because way back during my mom and my dad's time, so few people actually went to school, and China was so uneducated. The literacy rate was extremely low. But now in China, there are way too many people with bachelor's degrees. There are way too many people going to the STEM field. There are way too many people getting their PhDs. There are way too many people going to law school, going to medical school. There's just simply way too much competition. So to put it more simply, it looked something like this, right? This is basically human history, right? And everything that goes up must come down. This is let's say this is perhaps the average. I would say the people in the West, right? The Gen X, the silent generation, the boomers. They were born around this time period. This is the time that they grew up. They had the greatest transfer of wealth throughout human history. And it's because of this. They were born with 天时, 地利, and 人和. They had right place, right people, right time. Unfortunately for this generation, I wouldn't say we have hit rock bottom, but we're probably down here below average. We're just born in the wrong generation. You might disagree with my point, and you might argue, you say this is incorrect. But I think one thing everybody has to agree on is that everything is going to be so much harder for this generation, because we're simply just not born at the right time. We don't have the heaven, the earth, or the people with us. And if you're curious to know more about this story, I know I've already shared so much about my family and my hometown. And yes, I will be going back to China very, very soon. And yes, of course, I will be heading back to my subdivision. The house that I grew up in, which is building number 1. I remember I said that was probably built in 77 or 78. It might be torn down, might not be there anymore. But I know for sure the subdivision I grew up in is still there. And I don't even know if there's 30,000 people there anymore. There could only be 15,000 people left. I will show you guys around in my hometown, and perhaps you guys will understand this concept a little bit better. I know this video has been extremely long, but just want to thank you guys for staying till the end. And I will see you guys next week.
Everybody knows that I'm breaking down. Everybody knows I ain't faking now. Everybody knows my heart's faking now.